Okay, this is Mrs. Slauson, and this is the Chapter 2 review. You will be needing your graphing calculator. It's always good to refer back to your notes. Because of the format that I'm using, I will not be able to show you the graphing calculator parts to it, but I'll kind of explain what I'm doing. I will also not be doing the entire review, just some of it. So on the first page, I will be doing problem 1, and I will be doing 2A, 2C, I'm going to get you started on 3A, and then I'll do 3C. Just note, if you don't do well on this test, one of the first things I'm going to be looking at is to see that your review is done. So even though I'm only doing a few problems, you are expected to still do the entire review. All right, starting with the first question, I'm going to use this function. Right now it's in vertex form. And the first thing they want me to do is put it in standard form. And once it's in standard form, I'll be able to write the key point as an ordered pair. So first, to get into standard form, I need to recognize that this x plus 5 squared really means that there are 2 of them. And I apologize, my handwriting is not the neatest on this format, but we'll just have to deal with it. So the first thing I always do is I always start having the neighbors meet the neighbors, and I always start with the parentheses. So I'm going to have x go visit first. So I'm going to get an x squared and a 5x. I'm just multiplying, that's distributing. And now this 5 is going to go meet the neighbors. I get another 5x and a 25. And when I put those two together, I get an x squared, I get 10x, and I get 25. Now, one neighbor that has not met anybody yet is this negative right here. So now the negative wants to go and meet this new group. So when this distributes through, I'm going to get a negative x squared, a negative 10x, and then I'm also going to get a negative 25. And then I can't forget about the 9 from before. I haven't even used that. And I'm going to add it to the end. And I'll be combining these like terms. So when I'm done in standard form, here is my standard form. And when I combine the negative 25 and the 9, I get negative 16. So this, excuse me, is my final answer right here. Okay? What I still need to do is write its key point in as an ordered pair, and that is the y-intercept. And y-intercepts have x is 0, and then the y-intercept is negative 16. So this is my other answer right here. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is write it in factored form. So there's no way to go from vertex form to factored form. You can't do that. What I can do, though, is go from standard form to factored form. So here's standard form. And the first thing I'm going to do is factor out a GCF. And some of you might think this is ready to factor. But when you factor, you really want this first leading term to be positive. So I'm going to be factoring out a negative 1. And out of everything, so I end up with this. And now I'm going to factor and have other factors join my GCF of negative 1. So I'm going to make my x, and remember when you make your x, this is the top part, 16x squared. This is the middle part, 10x. And so factors of 16 that get to 10, you can run your factor program and you will see that they are 2 and 8. And this is an easy factoring one. It's easy factoring because it is just x squared. Had I left it as this would not be easy factoring. But because I factored out the GCF and I have x squared, I can do x plus 2 and x plus 8. And they can join my GCF of the negative 1 that I took out already. So when I'm done, this is factored form. And the key points I get from there are the x-intercept. One of them is negative 2, 0. That's its ordered pair. And the other one is negative 8, 0. And that's its ordered pair. So here's factored form. Here are my x-intercepts. And now I'm going to move on to the other question where they want me to graph it. So from all three forms, I've got some important points. So first, I'll start with the vertex. Going up here, the vertex is negative 5, 9. So I'm going to go over 5 and down 9. And there's negative 5, 9. I'm going to get my x-intercepts of negative 2, 0 and negative 8, 0. And even though, sorry, I just messed up. I did negative 9. Well, let me get my eraser going. Hold on 1 second. When the eraser does not want to erase here. Okay, so I messed up. I had put -5, -9. Here's -5 and 9 up here. Well, now the pen doesn't want to work. Hold on. About there. Okay, I could, if I wanted to, estimate my y-intercept of -16. It is not going to fit on the graph. So, if I just start to draw my, whoops, that's not very good. Eventually, this would hit -16 down here. So that's not a very good drawing. There we go. All right, the next one, I'm going to be factoring. These are all in standard form. I'm going to factor. So remember, the first part of all factoring is a GCF. So is there something I can take out of all three of there? There's not. So I'm going to go ahead and make my x. I multiply these for 14 x squared, and I got my middle one of 15x. So I need factors of 14 that get me to 15, and that's a 1x and a 14x. And this is not easy factoring. It's not easy factoring due to the 2 with the x squared. So you're going to have to rewrite it. So I'm going to rewrite it, but instead of this 15x, I'm going to have this version of 15x. So I'm going to rewrite it. There's 2x squared. Here comes my 15x. And then the 7. And once you get those 4 things, you can group them up. Here's my first 2, here's my last 2, and then I start to look at a GCF. So what can I factor out of both of these? I can't factor out a number, but I can factor out an x. And when I'm done, I have a 2x plus 1. And when I go to factor out my second parentheses, I'll have to remember that these are the same. So another 2x plus 1. And what is it that I factored out? What times 2x gives me this 14x above here, and that's a 7. And now I've got my factors. So my factors are, one of them is this x plus 7, and the other one is the 2x plus 1, only write it once, and those are your factors. So for 2a, this is factored form. All right, C. So I'm going to go to C. First thing is I look for a GCF, and that is a 2. I can take a 2 out, and I get an x squared minus 16. So after that, I'm going to try to factor this. The big difference is this only has 2 terms. So this is where I'm going to reference my difference of squares. It's called a difference of squares because I have subtraction here, and these 2 terms are perfect squares, which means they have square roots. The square root of x squared is x, the square root is 16. So joining my GCF of 2, I'll write x plus 4 and x minus 4. Now, somebody on the mile marker did this a little differently. After they took out the 2, they wanted this to have 3 terms, so they rewrote it. I'm going to put it up here like this. And they put in a 0x because that's like it's not even there. And then they made their x, and they had -16x squared, and they put the 0x on the bottom. So they wanted factors of -16 that get them to 0, and they got 4 and -4. And then because it is easy factoring, since it's x squared, they could just go to x plus 4 and x minus 4. So a little different way of approaching it, but that was a great way to do that. And I was really proud of that person. All right, next we're going to get into vertex form. So vertex form, remember, when we're done, will look like this problem up here. So in order to be vertex form, we're going to be grouping these x's, and it has to be x squared. So this one's ready to go. I'm only going to get this one started for you. But this is where we group our x's. Let me put the blank. And since I'm about to add something, I take it away. And to get the blank, you start with this -10, you cut it in half, and now you're going to go from there. But I will do letter C with you guys from beginning to end. So again, I'm going to group my x's, but this one's not ready to go because it's -3x squared and not x squared. So I'm going to factor -3 out, and I'm going to factor -3 out of this, so it becomes plus 4x. There's my blank. And now I'm going to take the 4. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to square it, and I get 4. So 4 is going to go here, but it's actually not worth 4. This is really -3x squared. That's really -12x. So I really added -12, which means over here, what I'm going to do is subtract -12. So if this is a little confusing for you, one thing you could do is, you're going to have your calculator. So you could do 7 minus -12, but I could also just add the opposite and see that 7 plus 12, and then the number outside of the parentheses is 19, just like this page number. Otherwise, when I go to my parentheses, it's going to be x plus this number. And again, the reason why it is this number is because if I did factor this, so I'm going to use the space over here. If I did factor it, what are factors of 4x squared that get me to 4x? And I would see that it's 2x and 2x. And because this is x squared and it's easy factoring, I could do x plus 2 and x plus 2. Or I could write it once as x plus 2 squared, which is what I have over here now. I don't want you to do all this though. I want you to see that this 2 goes here. And then that negative 3, I'm going to put back. So a few reminders. As you go through this section, you're going to have your graphing calculator. So if you want to see, is this really the right answer compared to this? You can go to the graphing calculator, put this problem into y1, and you can put this into y2, and you should have one graph. And then the same thing like on 2a, I could put this into y1 and then my answer into y2, and I should have the same graph. So just think about that as you're doing this. I mean, it's right, but if this were the test and you wanted to double check, that's a great way to go about it. All right, so number 4, we're going to go from, maybe factored form or vertex form into standard form. And we did this already in problem 1, but I'm going to do B for you. And I just want to point out again that this x plus 3 squared really means that there's 2 of them. And when you have parentheses, you should think of neighbors. And there's actually 3 neighbors. There's the negative, and then the x plus 3 and the x plus 3. Those are all neighbors. So we got 3 neighbors. So I always start with the parentheses. So x is going to go visit first. And I'm going to get x squared plus 3x. And then the 3 is going to visit, and I get 3x plus 9. So when I add these up, I get x squared plus 6x plus 9. And now I'm going to bring the other neighbor into it. And now the negative can go visit everything. And I'm going to get negative x squared plus negative 6x plus negative 9. And then don't forget about this 10. I'm going to bring the 10 in here. And then I'm just going to combine some like terms. I'm going to combine these. Again, I could add the opposite, and maybe you'll see that it becomes negative 19, but my final answer is negative x squared plus negative 6x plus negative 19. So if you want to see if you're right, put this into y equals, put your original problem to y equals, and you should see the same graph. All right, number 5. So this is the last thing that we talked about in our notes. We need to write an equation, and we will be writing it in vertex form. So here's vertex form. And we talked about that you need some points. So in vertex form, you need the vertex. So that's going to be 4, negative 5. And those are going to be our h and k. And then we need some other points. So I would either suggest this one or this one because they're easy points to identify. But I'll use this one as 3, negative 2, and that'll become the xy. So putting stuff in, y will become negative 2. We'll figure out a, x will become 3. H is 4, we're going to square it, and then we're going to add k for negative 5. So where you should start is with the parentheses, the stuff with the a. We're going to start right here. And I'm going to do 3 minus 4, and that's negative 1. And then I'm going to square that negative 1, and that will turn into 1. So the 1 is attached to a, and we usually write it like that. So now to solve for a, I'm going to add 5. That gives me a 3 here, and with 1a. And if you divide by 1, you're just going to see that a is 3. This is not the answer. The answer wants the equation. So remember, all equations, if you go back to some of the other ones that we've seen, whoops, that is not us, are, for instance, although it's not f of x, y equals with all of the other stuff. So you're probably getting dizzy. Let me go back to where we were. And so I'll be putting stuff back in for for a, h, and k, but I'll need to leave x and y as x and y. So it'll be y equals the a we figured out, x minus the h, which was 4, squared, and then our k of negative 5. And so this is your answer of vertex form. So again, you would have your graphing calculator here. You could go to y equals, type this in, and see, for instance, are these points in the table? And you can access the table by hitting second graph.